Ukraine's daring $10 billion strike shatters Kremlin's defenses and exposes Russia's deep vulnerability. A quiet stillness hung over Moscow, the kind that settles before a long day of controlled ceremony and rigid protocol. Inside the Kremlin's corridors, footsteps echoed softly, measured and predictable, untouched by urgency or fear. The city moved with the rhythm of a capital certain of its own safety, convinced its walls and weapons made it untouchable. Then, without warning, the calm fractured. Sirens pierced the silence, and the city that had believed nothing could reach it suddenly trembled. Today at 10 a.m., 57 of Russia's most powerful officials gathered inside the Kremlin's Grand Council Hall, unaware they were already the centerpiece of a Ukrainian intelligence operation unfolding beneath their feet. Outside, a grey Moscow sky hung low as the final authorization folder sat on the polished table. Sarmat Operational Test Final Approval. At the center of the long table was Vladimir Putin, flanked by Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, General Gurymov, and senior officials from Roscosmos and the Strategic Missile Forces. Putin signaled his intent to end the war on Russia's terms. None of them suspected the room itself was compromised, or that the very words they spoke were being recorded and analyzed in real time. 30 meters underground, Ukraine's GUR intelligence unit monitored everything. Their AI system, Perun Sentinel, watched the Kremlin the way a predator watches its prey, quietly, patiently, precisely. It detected shifts in thermal signatures from the Kremlin's isolated power network and cross-referenced them with encrypted signaling from the Strategic Missile Forces headquarters. At 10:17 a.m., a sudden spike appeared. Audio intercepts aligned with power fluctuations and a synchronized system-alive handshake from RS-28 Sarmat silos. The AI marked it, Category Omega, the highest possible threat classification, indicating a confirmed nuclear pre-launch sequence. Ukraine's response plan, rehearsed over months of simulations and war games, depended on timing, deception, and forcing Russia's most advanced air defense systems to reveal themselves. Phase 1 deployed 15 Bayraktar TB2 drones along the border, each pre-programmed to provoke Russian radar systems, not strike them. Their radar signatures were tuned to resemble noisy, flock-like clutter, too chaotic to ignore, but too cheap to matter. Meanwhile, Phase 2 prepared 10 upgraded MiG-29 Fulcrums, heavily modified with infrared suppression, digital stealth shaping, and observable skin composites. These aircraft represented the peak of Ukraine's long-term modernization campaign, carrying R-77 missiles for air combat and KH-31 missiles designed to blind enemy radars. These modifications were the result of 19 months of covert engineering, reducing the jet's radar detectability by nearly 87%. The combined strike package approached $200 million in value. Their target was nothing less than Russia's command nerve center, the Kremlin complex, protected by a $9.4 billion multi-layer defensive wall. The shield included S-500 Prometei interceptors, Buk M3 tactical missile units, Pantsir S-1 close-in systems, and Podsolnuk long-range radar arrays. For decades, Russian officials had claimed this network formed the most impenetrable air defense grid ever built. Ukraine's mission aimed to expose the weakness behind that claim. At 10:30 a.m. Kiev time, the confirmation arrived. Category Omega was active. In the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Defense's Subterranean Command Center, General Alexander Havrilenko stood over the glowing screens. The tension in the room was absolute. After a long silence, he authorized a direct strike on the Kremlin, judging retreat impossible and concluding that only an attack on the system's core could alter the outcome. His voice carried no triumph, only necessity. Seconds later, the TB2 swarm entered Russian airspace. Flying below 60 meters, the drones skimmed treetops and rooftops, weaving between urban structures to stay beneath radar coverage. They used Moscow's own skyline, its towers, apartment blocks, and industrial facilities as shields. The drones operated as a synchronized mini-swarm, constantly sharing radar lock data through encrypted peer-to-peer links. Whenever an S-500 radar illuminated one drone, that drone amplified its return signature, making itself an irresistible target. The Russians reacted exactly as Ukraine predicted. In minutes, $67 million worth of interceptor missiles were launched to destroy $20 million worth of decoys. The sky lit with contrails and sonic cracks as missiles streaked toward the small TB2S. 14 of them were annihilated, their fragments scattered across Moscow's outskirts. But their purpose had been fulfilled. They had recorded the entire engagement pattern of Russia's most advanced defenses. Hundreds of kilometers away, Ukrainian listening posts reconstructed the S-500's engagement behavior from the drone's final transmissions, confirming the precise timing of the 0.88-second blind cycle. Ukraine now knew every radar frequency, every lock-on delay, and, most crucially, the 0.88-second blind cycle in the S-500's main acquisition radar. Before the main strike even began, one TB2, call sign TB215, used that very blind cycle to slip through a narrow radar gap. Carrying a precise 12-kilogram fragmentation charge, it struck the Kremlin's copper-green dome, leaving a smoldering impact scar visible across the district. This small but symbolic hit proved the Kremlin was no longer untouchable. The sacrifice of the decoy drones unlocked the critical pathway, a precisely timed corridor through the S-500's 0.88-second blind cycle. At 11:02 a.m., 10 MiG-29 Fulcrums descended from 9,000 meters over Moscow. Their formation tightened into a lethal spearhead. In the lead jet's cockpit, the pilot saw not just a map, but a living corridor of weaknesses visualized from the drone's final transmissions. The jets aligned themselves to pass through the S-500 blind window at Mach 1.4, synchronized down to fractions of a second. Any deviation would ensure immediate destruction. The first two jets, acting as wild weasels, deliberately attracted Russian radar locks. Their RWR panels screamed warnings as S-500 batteries focused on them. But instead of evading, the pilots accelerated toward the threat. The lead wild weasel unleashed two KH-30-1P anti-radiation missiles directly at the S-500's command node. The impact tore open a 92-meter gap in the once vaunted shield, disrupting command synchronization across the broader network. With the defensive grid staggered, the main strike unfolded. At 12 kilometers from the Kremlin, the strike element received orders to lock the Kremlin command complex as the primary target. 20 Ka-29L missiles dropped from the MiG's pylons, their engines igniting into streaks of white flame. Instantly, Moscow's defenses roared back to life. Pantsir S-1 cannons fired streams of 30mm rounds upward, filling the air with metal shards. Buck-M3 launchers fired interceptors in overlapping spirals. S-500 batteries launched at full speed, each missile capable of reaching hypersonic velocity. Inside Ukrainian cockpits, radar receivers wailed. The lead pilot dove into a violent 9G roll as an S-500 missile detonated near his left wing. He released flares and activated his Polyote M1 jammer suite, flooding nearby radars with ghost signatures. The maneuver bought him 1.5 seconds, just enough to stay alive. Shadow 2 never had that chance. A hypersonic interceptor struck his aircraft head-on, erasing it in a single flash. A Russian MiG-31 Foxhound then descended into the chaos, attempting to intercept the formation. Shadow 3 reacted immediately, climbing vertically, firing an R-77 air-to-air missile, and engaging in a furious dogfight. That engagement, brief but decisive, delayed the Foxhound just long enough for the strike package to continue forward. Below, 18 of the 20 incoming missiles were destroyed in a storm of Russian counterfire. 2 remained on final approach, and in this operation, 2 were enough. Those last missiles struck the Kremlin's diplomatic guest house, only 190 meters from the main political complex. The dual detonations ripped through stone walls and shattered reinforced windows. 5 officials were killed, including 3 senior security advisors, a deputy parliamentary secretary, and a high-ranking diplomat, and 20 more were injured. The shockwave echoed across central Moscow, sending dust and debris into the air and silencing an entire city. At the same moment, MiG-29 tail number K-27 suffered catastrophic damage. Shrapnel shredded one stabilizer, and the engine flickered with flame. Refusing to eject, the pilot dropped to rooftop altitude and used the city's thermal clutter to confuse pursuit radars. The aircraft limped back toward Ukrainian territory, barely staying airborne, but surviving. Within minutes, Moscow's citizens were filming the burning guest complex on their phones, while independent outlets began broadcasting images that state channels struggled to suppress. Across the country, panic rippled. The ruble fell by 19% in a matter of hours. Private jets ferried the families of ministers and oligarchs out of Moscow, and silent crowds formed from St. Petersburg to Kazan, staring upward at a sky that no longer felt secure. For the first time, ordinary Russians realized their capital was vulnerable. Inside the Russian National Security Chamber, Putin sat frozen. The room around him was silent. His expression remained still, but his eyes showed what the officials would not dare say aloud. The myth of Russian invulnerability had been shattered. In Kyiv, a brief communique stated that the primary strategic objective had been achieved and no further comment was offered. The strike did not end the war, but it changed everything. It demonstrated that Ukraine could penetrate the most fortified point in Russia and strike its command structure directly. The psychological effect was immediate. Russia could retaliate, but doing so risked revealing even more weaknesses. Ukraine, long treated as the defensive underdog, had shown it could reach deep into the Russian core with precision and intelligence. International analysts labeled the operation the Night of the Broken Sky. In Washington, Berlin, and Beijing, government hotlines lit up as leaders asked the same question. If Ukraine can hit the Kremlin today, what might it strike next? General Havrilenko later summarized the operation by noting that Ukraine did not need to win that day. It needed Russia to understand that Ukraine could reach deep into the core of its power. The operation inflicted staggering financial losses. More than $9.4 billion in compromised defensive infrastructure, $67 million in wasted interceptor missiles, a destroyed Kremlin guest complex, and the loss of aircraft and systems worth millions more. Over $10 billion in immediate strategic and material damage. As dawn broke, one truth settled across the world. Ukraine had altered the balance of power, not through overwhelming force, but through precision, timing, and the intelligent use of every weakness Russia exposed. And so, the question now echoed far beyond Moscow. After a strike that cost Russia over $10 billion, how much more loss will it endure before the next blow determines the war's future? Share your thoughts in the comments section below.